Sometimes an opening does not need to be objectively perfect. Sometimes, it just needs to be poisonous, and this game is exactly that. We are looking at the Scandinavian Defense and more specifically the Leonhardt Gambit, a rare, tricky, and aggressive weapon where white throws a pawn forward, chases the black queen, and tries to drag the entire game into chaos, before black can even breathe. So let us go through this game properly, move by move, in the exact order it happened. Along the way, we will also bring in the engine's best defensive ideas for black so you can see not only how the trap works, but how close black was to surviving. White begins with the pawn to e4, black answers in classical Scandinavian style with the pawn to d5, immediately striking back in the center. White captures on d5, black recaptures with the queen on d5, so already you get the trademark Scandinavian picture. Black's queen comes out very early and white tries to gain time by attacking it. White develops the knight to c3, hitting the queen. Black slides the queen to a5, and now, the gambit begins. White pushes the pawn to b4. This is the Leonhardt Gambit. Now, if you ask the engine, it will tell you this is not the cleanest move. The calmer, more correct continuation was simple development with the knight to f3. But this is not a calm opening. This is a practical weapon. White is saying, take the pawn if you want, but if you do, your queen is going to become the target of the whole game. Black accepts, the queen takes the pawn on b4, natural, greedy, human, and very dangerous. Now here comes the next provocative idea. White jumps the knight to b5. Again, from a pure engine perspective, the move rook to b1 was more precise. But knight to b5 is full of venom. It creates a direct tactical threat. The knight wants to jump into c7, forking the king and the rook. So black has to respond carefully. The queen retreats back to a5, and this is one of the hidden points of the gambit. White has already pulled black's queen away from the center, then pushed it around, and now the queen is stuck out on the queen side while white starts building a lead in activity. White now brings the bishop to c4. This is where the position changes character. Completely, this is no longer just a queen chase. Now white is looking straight at f7, the weakest point in black's camp, and once again the engine has a small correction here. It preferred bishop to b2, but bishop to c4 is the practical trap move. It points directly at the king, adds pressure, and dares black to make one careless decision. And black does. Black pushes the pawn to a6. At first glance, this move looks normal. It attacks the knight. It asks white to explain the piece on b5, but this is the fatal misunderstanding. Because in sharp openings, you do not get time for normal-looking pawn moves if your king is about to come under fire. The engine hated this move. The correct defense was knight to c6. That move develops a piece, covers important squares, and most importantly, keeps black from drifting into a tactical disaster. Instead, black plays a6 and white strikes instantly. Bishop takes f7 with check. There it is, the classic sacrifice. White throws the bishop directly into black's kingside to rip the king into the open. This is the move the whole trap has been building toward. Now black faces the first true test of survival. Over the board, most players take the bishop, and black does exactly that. King takes f7. That is the losing move. Black wins a piece for the moment, but opens the king completely, abandons safety, and walks straight into the storm. White wastes no time. Queen to h5 with check. Beautiful. Suddenly black's king is exposed, the queen is active, the knight on b5 is still menacing, and the entire attack is running on pure tempo. In the actual game, black plays king to f6, and now the king is not just exposed, the king is wandering. Right into the center of the board, right into the open lines, right into white's hands. White continues with bishop to b2 check. The dark squared bishop comes alive from the corner, slicing across the long diagonal. Suddenly the bishop on b2, the queen on h5, and the knight on b5 are all participating in the attack. White's pieces are coordinating beautifully, while black's army is still asleep. Black tries to shut the diagonal with pawn to e5. A desperate defensive move, but white is completely in control now. White captures on e5 with the bishop, giving check again. That is precise and powerful. White removes the blocker, reopens the diagonal, and keeps the king under direct fire. Black's king steps to e7, and now white calmly grabs on c7 with the knight. White is still attacking, but now also collecting material. The knight on c7 tears into black's position, hits key squares, and starts eyeing the rook on a8 as well. Black develops the bishop to d7, trying at last to bring a piece into the defense, but it is too late. White plays bishop to d6 check, another clean, forcing move. Black finally takes the bishop with the king, king takes d6, and in one sense that looks like relief. Black has removed the attacking bishop, but in reality, this was the point of the combination. White now plays queen takes a5. Black's queen is gone. That is the final tactical harvest. Everything from the early pawn sacrifice, to the knight jump, to the bishop sacrifice, to the queen check, all of it was designed to overload black's position and leave the queen stranded. And now white cashes in. So what are the big lessons from this game? First, in the Scandinavian, early queen activity is always double-edged. Second, this gambit is all about forcing tempos. Third, and this is the most important, when danger is rising around your king, quiet pawn moves can be fatal. Black's pawn to a6 looked innocent, but it ignored the real problem. And finally, this is why the Leonhardt Gambit is so dangerous in practical chess. If black does not know the exact defensive ideas, the position can explode in just a few moves. This was not just a random tactical win. This was a trap with logic, the sacrifice, the checks, the exposed king, the stranded queen, and finally, the kill. That is the Leonhardt Gambit. Beautiful, venomous, and absolutely ruthless.